Welcome back to M.L. Miller Frights, Best in Horror 2020-2021. I'm M.L. Miller. Well, I've already covered a pair of vampire films on the countdown. There are two other great toothy offerings that require mentioning. This one again shows that one of the most tried and true, yet versatile subgenres of horror is that of the vampire. This is M.L. Miller Frights' Best in Horror Countdown 2020-2021. Number 13. Jacob's Wife was released April 16th, 2021. It's available on demand and digital download from RLJE Entertainment and streaming on Shudder. It's directed by Travis Stevens and written by Kathy Charles, Mark Steensland, and Travis Stevens. Barbara Crampton plays Anne, the doting wife of the local minister, Jacob, played by Larry Fessenden. While she swallows her pride when Jacob cuts her off in conversations and tries her best to make Jacob feel happy and cared for, Anne longs to live a bigger and better life. When her old boyfriend comes into town to inspect a local factory for reconstruction, Anne meets him for dinner, which leads them to check out the factory together and a shared kiss. But just as Anne decides cheating is not something she wants to do, out of the darkness a vampire attacks, leaving Anne bitten but alive. When she gets home, Anne begins lusting for blood, and Jacob is becoming mighty suspicious of his wife's new behavior. Jacob's Wife was such a breath of fresh air, it was hard to believe. Not only does it find a new and interesting take on vampires, but it also features two older actors who have been featured in too many horror films to count, and gives them leading roles. I'm as big of a fan of seeing brainless teen and 20-somethings slaughtered as the next guy, but there's something amazing about a script written for adults, having adults do and say adult things, handling adult themes in an adult way. As this film went on, I found myself downright giddy at seeing characters evolve and actually talk together when they have a disagreement. There's a scene where Jacob admits he was wrong about the way he had treated Anne all of these years, and after Anne accepts the apology, she apologizes herself for being such a pushover for so long. Two people admitting they were wrong without one of them pouncing on them and going for the throat? Imagine that in this day and age. I couldn't believe how smart and mature this film was, as it took the material we've seen time and time again of coping with the transformation into a vampire, and wrote it not as a piece to empower just one person and diminish the next. In a lesser writer's hands, Jacob would be a Bible-thumping zealot, and Anne would be the fierce female warrior that doesn't take no for an answer. Instead, in Jacob's Wife, Anne and Jacob are complex characters in an extraordinarily complex predicament, and they actually love each other. While Jacob's Wife is definitely a story about a woman finding her own voice, it doesn't succumb to making one side look bad in order to elevate another. Watching this film, I could see 1,000,001 ways it could have gone wrong had this film been done by a major studio. And I was exuberant to see it go in a much more realistic, tender, and surprising way. I've always been a fan of Barbara Crampton. I was lucky enough to be a judge with her at a Chicago Film Festival a few years ago, and I was definitely starstruck, as she is as charming and talented as she was in the films that made her a horror icon. Seeing this film give her a chance for her star to shine brightly again filled me with glee. Crampton is given a nuanced character to work with here. She loves her husband, but has a growing need for something more. At the same time, she's given the chance to be sexy as hell and succeeds in every scene she's in. Forget Jamie Lee Curtis. Barbara Crampton is the true queen of horror, and if you have any doubt, see this movie as a reference. Not only does she take risks, but she isn't afraid to get down and dirty, eating worms, wearing facial appliances in vampire form, and bathing in blood from head to toe. The world of horror is better because we have Barbara Crampton in it. And how awesome is it that this film features a lead role for the godfather of indie horror, Larry Fessenden. The actor is notorious for showing up in bit roles in just about every notable horror movie for the last decade. While he was given a sizable role in We Are Still Here, Fessenden is front and center for most of the film alongside Crampton. Fessenden gets to flex both his comedic and dramatic muscles here and shines brightly at both. Jacob's Wife has a darkly comedic tone throughout, but once Jacob uncovers Anne's bloody secret, the comedy really works, as does the drama, but both never outshine or diminish the terror. Travis Stevens gave us Girl on the Third Floor last year, which I found to be thematically uneven, but possessing a lot of potential. Stevens really ups his game with Jacob's Wife, delivering darkly funny scenes alongside poignant and tender ones, while never forgetting that this is a hardcore and gory horror movie. Not too many directors can juggle these tones successfully, but Stevens does. There are some wonderfully realized scenes of pure gothic horror, as the vampire in this one feels ripped straight from Bram Stoker. The master, played by Bonnie Aarons, is played rat-like, slender, with hands hanging low and outstretched at the wrists, just like Max Schreck's performance in Nosferatu. The lead vamp is even accompanied by scores of rats at all times. Plus, there are some amazing effects going on with the vampires as their eyes become red and bloodshot, weeping tears of blood when they're in the presence of fresh red stuff. These vamps utilize all kinds of bits and pieces of other films, but still feel iconic. Top to bottom, Jacob's Wife is an unforgettable vampire tale, from the stellar performances from its cast, to the massive amounts of bloodletting, to the fiendish sense of humor, to the massive beating and tender heart. Jacob's Wife is a new classic in the vampire genre. Don't miss it. Today's bonus review is Boys from County Hell. It was released April 22nd, 2021, and it's available streaming on Shudder. It's directed by Chris Baugh and written by Chris Baugh and Brendan Mullin. A group of construction workers who spend half their lives in a pub unearth a creature that inspired Bram Stoker to write Dracula after they knock over a stone monument that is said to mark the grave of said monster the Irish locals call Abartach, played by Robert Nairn. Boys from Country Hell is one of those films like Shaun of the Dead, Cockneys vs. Zombies, and the like that takes a local, usually European of some sort, lifestyle, which is pretty laid-back, straight-talking, and blue-collar, and tosses them into the middle of a supernatural horror. While the comparison may seem like a jab, it's kind of like those old scary movie films where there's not a lot of romanticizing the monster, but instead it's basically see a monster, scream, and run away. You know, like you normally would do if you saw something like that. And that reaction, though it still involves pants-shitting fear, is often pretty funny. Much like Shaun of the Dead, the lovable losers of Boys from County Hell drink a lot, party a lot, are hungover a lot. They live a slacker lifestyle. They're young and dumb, or old and dumber, and sometimes it's fun to see horror from that angle. And Boys from County Hell is a ton of fun. Most of the comedy comes from watching these idiots bumble around their lives, and when faced with this otherworldly monster, bungle that up too. The running joke is that Bram Stoker based Dracula on the monster Abartach, but only partially. That means that he got most of the rules of vampirism wrong. Garlic, stakes through the heart, and most of the other stuff that are well-known ways to do away with vampires don't really work against this monster, no matter how hard these guys try. While it gets a bit repetitious, seeing the locals wait for some kind of reaction from the monster and then their attempt to kill it having no effect on it brought a smile to my face every time. These locals have a childish charm to them. When they run to the car, even though the monster is after them, they don't forget to call shotgun, which honestly is something my friends and I would still do if we were in that situation, even though we're all in our 40s now. While I wouldn't call this the most intellectual of vampire movies, I would call it one of the more charismatic ones. The cast is likable, and there's enough of a backstory going on with all of them to make you care. The lead, Jack Rowan, stumbles a bit at times dramatically, but he's supposed to be kind of a bumbling idiot, and he's not really required to do a lot of heavy emotional lifting. Rowan is given a relatable arc involving coming to terms with himself, his fate, and possibly even growing up a bit, a message that is developed well in this engaging hometown horror tale. I laughed and cared about pretty much all of the characters, hoping they would survive the night, even though not all of them do. One of the more interesting and unique aspects about Boys from County Hell is the way the vampire creature drinks its blood. Instead of Stoker's more intimate vampire bites, this monster actually draws blood from victims from a distance, having blood flow from open wounds, eyes, ears, nose, and mouths, and then trail across the ground towards the vampire as it walks by the homes of the townsfolk. It makes for an awesome visual of the blood trailing across the ground as if it had a mind of its own. While the look and the tone of the the Vampire reminded me of another Irish vampire flick from 2014, From the Dark, though that one is much more of a serious film. This vampire still has an iconic and effective take on the Nosferatu as a desiccated body in search of sustenance, all lithe and lanky. Though the tone of Boys from Country Hell is often light and comical, the horror is as serious and deadly as it gets. I love the tightrope Boys from County Hell walks between comedy and horror. This is one of those films that seems to have been made with a lot of heart and local Irish flavor. It's quite obvious from the early An American Werewolf in London reference and the appearance of Dawkins' Dream Warriors playing on the pub's jukebox that the filmmakers were fans of the genre. It's also got a rough and tumble Irish punk soundtrack that keeps the pace boisterously charging forward. While it uses a lot of the old vampire film tropes, there's enough charm going on with Boys from County Hell to entertain anyone with a passion for horror. Come back tomorrow for the next installment to the Best in Horror Countdown 2021. If you hit all the pertinent bells and whistles down below, you're sure never to miss it. See you then.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be. Stuck inside your reality. You're